Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Angel Insights, the show that goes deep into the world of early stage investing. Today, I'm joined by the incredible David Hickson, Chief Strategic Development Officer and part of the founding team at Founders Factory, prior to which he worked for a number of very successful startups, including being an early employee at lastminute.com. On today's episode, we will be making reference to a fund that SyndicateRoom and Founders Factory are putting together. Therefore, I find it prudent to remind all investors that these are high-risk investments and you are unlikely to be protected if something goes wrong. You should not invest unless you're prepared to lose all the money that you have invested. Now, without further ado, we can get to the show. David, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Very kind of you to ask me to be on.
Now, today's a special episode. For those who are not aware, we're running a fund together, or we will be soon. We're building a fund together, which we're very excited about. For those that missed the launch video, I'll make a link for that available in the show notes. But today's episode is to cover a few questions that have come up often from investors out there. And David, you've so graciously come on today to be interrogated and to answer these frequently asked questions. So you're in the hot seat today. How are you feeling, David?
I'm feeling pretty good. I've just come back from France. Well, I was in France for a couple of weeks, but been back a week. And we went to a rather lovely villa in just north of Nice there. So yeah, I'm actually feeling pretty good.
Well, hopefully that doesn't change after today. Ominous music. I know a little bit about Founders Factory, but I was hoping you could give us some insight into kind of the starting of Founders Factory, why it was started, and kind of what you actually do for those who are less familiar with it.
Um, Depending on who you ask amongst the team, there's always a sort of a slightly different starting point. But because I was there more or less right at the very start of the whole adventure, I like to start right at the very start, which is 1998. That's not when Founders Factory started, but it's when a company called lastminute.com was started by a chap called Brent Hoberman, a lady called Martha Lane Fox, and employee number 3 there was a chap called Henry Lane Fox, who was Martha's brother. And I mentioned that because a couple of years later, in 2000, I joined too. And that was the first time that I'd met Henry, Brent. That's this sort of kernel of Founders Factory, in that it's a group of individuals who've known each other for quite a long time, that have kind of been on a journey together. Now, lots of things have happened in between. Henry left lastminute.com before we got the exit in 2005, but I was still there with Brent. And then when Brent started his next thing in 2006, a thing called MyDeco, I helped him start that. And the cleverest thing that did was make a strategic investment in a very nascent startup that eventually became Made.com, which was also quite successful in the end. I went off to had my own, built my own company for a while, and then in early 2015, I'd been off because I was running my own company for a while. And I got a message from Brent, and he said that he and Henry had been working on an idea, and would I like to come and talk to them about it? So this was in, I think, February or March 2015. And I went along, and Henry told me about this idea. And I just thought that was something that I really needed to be a part of. And it was Founders Factory. So when we started, the thing that we did slightly different, I think, and this actually, this is not by design, but we've gone full circle on where I started here, which was, what did I find interesting about the idea that was pitched to me was, as someone who'd been in and around technology businesses for then 15 years, and I think I was on my 3rd or 4th startup or scale up. Like, it's hard work, man, and to do another startup just felt like I didn't really want to do it. right?
Mm.
But because I'm an operator first and an investor second, and and when it was pitched to me, this idea of creating what we've created now, which is kind of half a venture studio, and I'll explain to you what that is in a minute, and kind of half an investing company that invests cash plus help. I can hear people thinking, "Oh my god, what is this help nonsense?" Um, that just sounded really exciting to someone who had, when you can do it across a portfolio, because of course, from a financial point of view, you're sort of de-risked on the downside. Like if you've got a portfolio that you can invest in, you're sort of de-risked a little bit. It's obviously fun, right? Because you can just experience lots of different things, and you can garner knowledge. You can gain like a sort of a set of insights across a portfolio, and you learn by experience, right? Like you learn by being in the trenches and working hard. You learn the things that go wrong, which happens more often than they go right. And that's just a really interesting proposal. So the original idea, which this was 2015, but still, it still sounds broadly insane to me. And how we pulled it off, I don't know. But the original idea was we were going to raise 42 million pounds, right? We were going to raise 42 million pounds, and what we were going to do with that money, and it was capitalizing the original Founders Factory vehicle, and we were going to build in the venture studio 50 companies, and we were going to invest via what we described as an accelerator, which is not the same as a kind of a Techstars or a Wire at the time, um, um, in another 150 companies. So by the end of the fifth year, we'd have a portfolio of 200 companies, right? And when we say build, what we meant by that is start them, right? Give them the original capital, right? Help them understand product, help them understand market, help them get into market, like trying to get through the sort of the 0 to 1 of getting these things going. So that was the original idea behind it. So the original 6 investors into the original Founders Factory vehicle were corporate investors, and there was a beautiful meeting of minds there, because what those investors didn't necessarily want to have is outsourced innovation where like we would act as an agency for them, where we would spend a fortune on whiteboarding, and we would take fees from them, and we would build products for them, as adjacent technology products for them, this, that, and the other.
They didn't
They were
want
just
consultants.
they didn't want consultants. They wanted something slightly different. They wanted to invest and build companies that in a sector of mutual interest between us, the team at Founders Factory, and them, ideally where we could find synergy between that corporate and the things that we were building and investing in, right? We called it unfair advantage. It doesn't always happen, but still just getting the individuals within the corporate sort of better understanding the potential disruptions in their sector, or the new technologies, or that sort of thing is strategic return for them as well, right? And we've got some brilliant partners doing that, Aviva, L'Oreal. We've had Guardian. We've had some great partners where we've done that, and obviously there were things that we could do as a group that if they were trying to do it themselves, they would find it very hard. For them, financial return and strategic return is key, right? And again, I think that's, as it's turning out, I think that's like we're doing okay. So I just want to talk about how do you really add value?
That definitely is the hot topic right now in venture. We're not just adding capital, we're adding value. Well, what do you mean you're adding value?
I think that in order to really add value, you've got to have talent on staff. And I think something slightly different. I think this is all about incentives, right? Is it Charlie Munger who said, "Show me the incentive, I'll show you the result"? Like, I think I probably completely misquoted him.
We'll
but,
fact check this
but
later. No.
yeah,
Um,
is it him or yeah, it might be him. Anyway, um, and I think there are two things that you need to happen. One, I think you need to have great talent, right? Operating talent, people that are used to working with startups, and then the incentives need to align. And what I mean by that is there isn't a fee relationship between the people that are providing the help and the startups. Instead, the people that are providing the help are incentivized through the success of the portfolio. In other words, their success is your success. Because this whole idea is that you need to attract good talent and you need to make sure that that talent is working hard for the success of the portfolio. And they do that if they feel as though there's going to be real financial success to them if their portfolio is successful, right? So what we would do is we would make the investment and then we would provide a program where we would have some of the best growth marketers in London, or the best product people, or the best data science people that we could afford to pay, but the founders of these very early stage startups couldn't necessarily afford to pay. So that was the idea. That's where we started. The difference between us, I think, in a lot of the other accelerators is like when we aren't or we weren't, we're not lightly capitalized, and we've done it now for a long time. I mean, 9 years, and we did build those 50 companies. We did invest in those 150, and actually we did so well that actually we then created new vehicles, right? We did one with Marks and Spencer. We did one with Reckitt Benckiser. We've started one in Milan. We've got an operation in Germany with Vonovia. We've got an LLC vehicle that invests in technology for climate communities based out of Miami and Bahamas. We're in a joint venture with a great entrepreneurial team out of Bratislava. And yeah, so actually indirectly across these different vehicles that we built, we've got a portfolio of now, 350, 400 companies.
Are you still
So
excited
yes,
about it all?
so there's two things I think that make me excited about there's lots of things that make, if you say, am I still excited? That continue to excite me is trends are always shifting, right? Things are always evolving. Okay. And the second thing that I'm going to say actually dovetails very nicely with the product that you and we together are putting together, right? So I'll talk about that in a minute, right? But that's the second thing. But it's very powerful. But let me just say the first thing first. One of the things that we've noticed actually, in terms of the sort of things that we are building, that we're investing in, is trends shift. And there are some things now which are becoming very zeitgeist for VC investors were broadly uninvestable 5 years ago. So anything that sort of had a hardware component, anything that felt like it was too deep techy and not gonna see the light of day for 20 years, these things weren't considered to be venture backable. That's no longer the case. And the catalyst for that actually was the climate emergency and sort of, 2019, maybe 2020, sort of with a bit of a pause for COVID, but then coming back again. There was a ton of funds that were looked and felt like venture capital funds, but were investing in startups that were building things to solve for the climate emergency. And suddenly here we are in 2024, and there is a sort of been a shift. And I was reading this the other day, like the majority or the biggest sector now that's receiving VC funding is actually deep tech, i.e., things that more often than not have a hardware component. And it's sort of realized that actually with a business like that, you do have the technology risk, of course, but if you crack the technology risk, often the market is there for you to grab. So you have less of the market risk. So that's the first thing, is like things are always evolving. But then there's been another, and this is the second thing, and this does relate to the product that you and I put together. I personally had a certain experience that really woke me up to an opportunity, and that was there was a it was a back end of where were we to the back end of last year, no, start of last year. There's an individual that I knew, young, brilliant young entrepreneur. And he came to me and he gave me this idea. He told me this idea. It's a product for technology sales solutions architects, right? And he gave me the idea, and felt like it felt like a brilliant product. No one's been thinking about solutions architects, right? Well, that's one of the opportunities, right? Because actually, it's a relatively new job. It's a relatively new job, technical sales, and the way that it's evolved, which is a lot of sort of putting together a bunch of APIs and that sort of thing. It requires real technical expertise, and there's no product for them. Well, this guy's been thinking about putting one together, but he said the thing was unlocked, right, by GPTs. Now, that doesn't mean that the product is a GPT wrapper, because it's not. And by the way, if you create a GPT wrapper for a product, it would be commoditized almost immediately. No, the product idea that this chap was telling me about was much more complete than that. But the unlock was two features that required a sort of semantic understanding of things like emails and notes that you put together to record things. That didn't really exist 20 months ago, right? Because there was I think it's probably GPT 3.5 was a bit rubbish, but like GPT 4, whatever it was, right? There was an explosion. And I thought, that's a B2B SaaS product that just couldn't have existed. Like it's only now could it really have existed. And I thought to myself, I think there's a big opportunity here, because I think it was one of the Founders Forum events, and I was listening to it. It might be Joe Lonsdale, the Palantir founder, but it might not have been. And they were saying, like, they thought that SaaS, B2B SaaS, was saturated, right? Like, they don't want to build anything more because, like, there's already B2B SaaS for everything. I sort of disagreed anyway, because even the idea with for the solutions architects, there's always an evolution, right? I don't think that same individual on that same panel would say that anymore. I don't think anybody is saying that anymore. Again, because there's been an unlock here, right? And we're very early. And the good thing about, and we're very early into that trend, and that's the best place to be, right? That's the best place to be, which is early on a trend. And there's a couple of other things that I think that are important about that, the sort of the dynamic here. And again, this individual was telling me about. They were telling me that they didn't think that they ever really needed to be that big in terms of team, right? Because a lot of the things that they do in the back end, similar to the way that they're doing in their product in the front end, are through automations, right? This sounds a little bit dystopian, but it is what it is, right? So he might be naive, and I might be naive in agreeing with him. I'm not the only one who thinks this, by the way, but there's this sort of idea, and it's a thesis. Doesn't mean we don't know that whether it's going to be true or not, but it's a thesis that the companies of the future are going to be even more capitally efficient than they are today. In other words, they're going to need less people and things to be successful. And the reason why I believe him is that we at Founders Factory run a whole bunch of automations. I know exactly what he's talking about. I think if your listeners have come across, I don't know if you have, Tom, I'm sure you have, things like Zapier and things like that. But that completely exploded when you could use ChatGPT to understand, like, emails, right? The number of automations that you could create and the value of those automations, again, completely exploded. And let's be clear, we're just at the very start. This is the opportunity right now for something that you and I hadn't heard of 20 months ago.
I know.
Right? It's incredible. So he was obviously this individual who was building this product, sort of preaching to the converted, because of course similar to, I'm sure you do, Tom, I run my automations, and like helps me out. I build them myself. And I'd felt the opportunity just by using the GPT to get there. But anyway, so I sort of agree with the thesis, right? But my insight was you're still going to need to get from 0 to 1. You're still going to need the pre-seed,
Yep.
and you're still going to need the seed, at least, possibly also the Series A, right? But I thought actually the best place to be investing here for this particular opportunity is the pre-seed. So now, when you guys came to us and said, "Look, we want to build an SCIS product," I'd already been thinking, well, look, there's I think the space is B2B SaaS for the reasons that we've just described, and I think pre-seed is the place where we should be building a new fund, right? So there was it was a sort of like, okay, you guys, I was like, I think I've got an idea for you, right? And obviously, I pitched it to you guys, and you guys, well, yeah, that sounds like, yeah, we agree. And the reason why we think it's best done as the program as we've devised it is because, by definition, all of these startups are going to be more or less in the same place in terms of their development, because, of course, the SEIS requirements is fairly constrained, right? So we know broadly they're all going to be more or less at the same point of their journey. And therefore, the experience of them being part of a cohort where they're learning from and they're working with some of the very best in the business, where I think they can not just learn from the people within Founders Factory, but also from their peer group, which, by the way, is very powerful. And again, this is going to sound a bit salesy. I don't know who else, certainly in the UK, possibly in Europe, maybe the US, don't know, who else can do what we do. And I think it would be silly not to take advantage of that. And I think the cohort will have a marvelous experience.
I absolutely agree. Of course, I would say that, but I'm keen to put 2 points together here. So we're looking at a very early group of companies that are in a market, as you mentioned, is very early, applying GPTs and other elements of AI to disrupt markets that have not really been disrupted yet. And they're going to be put through a program with these incredible individuals that you've assembled into your team. But given how early the market is and that it's still very much figuring itself out, what is it that they're getting on the program? Because as experienced as the people on the program are, you're often looking at challenges that they've not faced yet because the market is building for these types of products and services.
That's not true, Tom,
Oh,
because the thing that makes us different is because these individuals work in the venture studio as well, right? And the venture studio, remember, is even earlier than SEIS, right? We're the ones that understand how to validate your assumptions, how to validate whether a product potentially has a market. We're the ones that can do the smoke tests. We're the ones that can do the kind of all the different tactics we have to try and understand whether this is a product that can have a potential market, and if so, then how do you go to market? So the individuals that are working on this program are very used to working at the very start. And most of what we know after doing this for 9 years has been by doing it wrong in the first place and learning, right? So the great thing about us building a fund in year 9 of Founders Factory is we've already made a lot of mistakes,
hmm,
which we have refined to hopefully create a program that allows you to understand how to do it without having to make the mistakes. So, like, it's a silly thing. It's not silly, but our mission is to help founders go further faster. And I genuinely think we can help them go further faster because we've got some sort of frameworks as to what is best practice of this stuff. And again, not because we learnt it in a textbook, but because we've done it ourselves.
hmm. I think one of the things that is still kind of missing that people are asking me about is where you're getting the companies and the entrepreneurs that go on the accelerator, because the deal flow is just as important, in my opinion, as as the program itself, and being able to
Yeah.
get to those incredible people and companies so early. How are you guys doing that?
Um, we're very fortunate. So there's sort of two broad answers to that. We're very fortunate in that, um, I think in our world anyway, we're fairly well known, right? Like we've got a, you know, whether you want to call it the lastminute.com mafia or not, I don't know. But we've been around a while, so we've got a strong brand. It's a strong, trusted brand, and I think the people behind the brand, I think, are deserving of that trust. And secondly, we've got like I say, we've got an investing team, so we do outbound. We're very used to it. We've made in the UK 200 investments, I think, including the original 150 that I was describing, plus the other programs that we built. I talked about Marks and Spencer there. I talked about Reckitt. So we have tools that we use for that. We've got a very robust CRM. We have deal flow is. I think if the opportunity is there, we'll see it. And of course, once this fund is launched, we're going to make a big noise about it. And I would expect a lot of inbounds. You would remember these founders, by definition, they've got a huge amount of initiative. They'll find us, or we'll find them. So I have no fear for the deal flow, none at all. And I think we've got the experience to work out which to sort the wheat from the chaff. I do.
So you've got a fantastic team experience. You've run these programs before. You talked about initially raising 42 million for the business. You've set up other funds, some in other countries, which is fantastic. With this particular one, though, and I know you mentioned serendipity, but why raise it as an SEIS fund as opposed to going to some of the LPs that you've been to before?
Like the pre-seed market in the UK is dominated by SEIS, and there aren't many, certainly none of the corporates. It's too early for corporates, and it's too early for most institutions. And I think the good thing about SEIS is it's sort of, and SEIS funds, is it's kind of institutionalized angel investing. And as I said before, I think the opportunity is pre-seed. By the way, it fits very well with where we're good at. I mean, Tom, you challenged me a bit earlier in the podcast, but we're good at the pre-seed. It's like that's what that's where we play. But if you want to build a fund at that kind of that pre-seed stage, I think the SEIS fund is the only game in town right now.
David, it's been absolutely a pleasure speaking with you, learning more about the program and Founders Factory in general. For anyone who wants to find out more about what you do, of course, I suggest going and checking out SyndicateRoom.com and reading a bit about the fund. But for those that want to find out more about you and Founders Factory, where should they go?
So yeah, if you want to know about Founders Factory, foundersfactory.com, and of course check out the fund page on Syndicate Room.
David, thank you again for joining us on this very insightful episode. I know all the listeners will have enjoyed that as well. And for those of you who have found the episode interesting, please do like and subscribe. And if you'd like to know more about our fund, which we are building with Founders Factory, please do head on over to syndicateroom.com. That's it from us. Until the next time. Bye.